Welcome to the Talking Michigan Transportation Podcast. I'm Jeff Cranston. This week we'll be talking again about the roads in Michigan and the difficulty of maintaining what we have with the funding that we have, and it's just not enough. We've made some improvements in the state trunk lines. Those are the M routes, the I routes, and the US routes, the most heavily traveled roads in the state, thanks to Governor Gretchen Whitmer's ambitious Rebuilding Michigan plan. But we're still going to need a broader solution from policymakers, as the governor pointed out last week when she was in Detroit for the Pancakes and Politics breakfast, that we still need a long-term sustainable solution. Chad Livengood, who has done some extensive reporting on this, has another story this week taking a look at pavement and what the lack of investment has meant to our state's littoral foundation. We'll be talking with him first. His lead in the story posted today said simply, if there's one issue that bedevils Michigan policymakers the most, it's those damn roads. For much of this century, lawmakers and three governors from both parties have been debating how to pay for fixing Michigan's deteriorating transportation infrastructure following decades of stagnant investment and declining buying power of per gallon taxes on fuel. That says it well. After Chad, I'll be speaking with Craig Newell, who is the administrator of the statewide planning division at MDOT and knows a lot about pavement projections and asset management and how MDOT planners track where the investment is needed and how long pavements can last and how to stretch the dollars as much as possible. But to begin this week's conversation, I'm with Chad Livengood, who's a senior editor at Crane Business Detroit, and probably, as media goes, and gosh, I certainly don't want to give anybody else short shrift here, but one of the foremost experts on transportation policy, just because he's delved into it so deeply and been writing about it so long, which sounds odd because he's really not that old. Chad has a story that posted this week, Thursday, March 24th, looking at pavement conditions and what's been going on in Michigan. And despite some incremental increases in revenue, we're really not seeing a dent. Pavement overall, especially on the local system, is going the wrong way. So Chad, thanks for taking time to talk about your reporting and give me, I guess, high level, what you came away from this with.
Well, Jeff, I'm 39 years old. I turned 40 in November, and I've spent my entire 30s writing about crummy roads in Michigan. And at this point, I project I will continue to do that in my 40s, just based on where we're going. And so, yeah, back in 2015, I was at the Detroit News in the Lansing Bureau, maybe even back it up to 2014 to that infamous lame duck session after then Governor Rick Stoner was reelected. He had been already trying for a couple of years to get road funding or a gas tax increase on the agenda in the legislature. And, anybody who just understands politics would know freshly reelected governor with a lame duck legislature, there's no better time to get what you want than now. And
especially after you've given them a couple things they wanted.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, he had to walk the plank two years prior and give them right to work with 10,000 angry union guys outside the Capitol. So yeah, I mean, at the time I thought we're increasing gas taxes, and of course that's not what happened. And we all remember that press conference in the governor's Capitol office when they rolled out what I think is probably the worst political diagram policy proposal I've ever seen. It was this road. I don't even know. It was a road to the future looking thing where it showed how the proposal one sales tax increase was going to produce $2 billion more for roads every year, backfill the repeal of sales tax on gasoline, convert the gas tax to a percentage-based wholesale tax. I mean, just do all kinds of things I think there was a tax on EVs in there somewhere. I mean, it was the most convoluted thing ever, and we found out that the voters, understood that quite quickly when 80% of them said no to that proposal in May of 2015. So then we got, the year dragged on, and of course that was the year of the infamous Coarser Gamrat scandal. So the House Representatives got consumed for a couple of months on, on a sex scandal, while the governor was trying to keep focused on the roads.
Gosh,
Finally,
who
we
wrote
get.
that story?
I did, but so yeah, so October
So it's
of
your fault that they got distracted.
I can't confirm or deny that, um, but by October of 2015, there was clearly some people that were exhausted by this issue, namely Richard Dale Snyder, and so they did a deal, and we got this current plan that we are now finally seeing the full fruits of, and that was the $1.2 billion plan. Half of it was a tax increase with a 7-cent gas tax increase, diesel parity, first diesel tax increase since 1984, and then the 20% increase in the vehicle registration fee. But as you and I both know, that did not actually materialize for many years later, the whole thing, because they set the tax increase to happen January 1st, 2017, after the 2016 election. And the $600 million from general fund was phased in over 5 fiscal years, but it finally got fully funded last year, and then the inflationary increase to the gas tax got added, and just kicked in this year, when gas went up less than 1 penny per gallon. So I went back and kind of wanted to look at what do we get for this, and based on the ratings that we know right now, from MDOT and other agencies. In 2015, 39% of the pavement was in poor condition, 45 was in fair, and 18% was considered good. Um, this year, 40% is considered in poor condition, 35% in fair condition, and 25% in good shape. So we do have more pavement in good shape, but we have basically the same amount of pavement in poor shape. And that's kind of a reflection of how fast the roads are deteriorating. And my takeaway from all of it is the roads really aren't much better off than they were 7 years ago.
A couple things there. One, people who were honest at the time in 2015, including I think then Senate Majority Leader Arlen Nikoff, said this is a good start. Um, Nobody was saying that too loudly, but I mean, I was that it wasn't going to do what really needed to be done, and especially the lack of sustainability with any solution that involves general fund. I mean, roads have traditionally in our country been funded by user fees, and there's a good reason that that's a model that works. And so planning on general fund is a bad idea to begin with. The two good things you mentioned that did come out of that package were diesel parity and the inflation adjustment. But as soon as we did that, because we're always compared to Ohio, and people say, "Gosh, Ohio has better roads." Well, Ohio taxes diesel at 47 cents, while we're at 27, and they upped their regular fuel gas tax to 38. So you do get what you pay for in this thing when it comes to roads. So talk about your reporting and how you delved into these pavement projections, and you've studied the Transportation Asset Management Council and the very robust research and work they do to really keep track of pavements at all levels, the city roads, the county roads, and the state routes, which the state routes have shown some incremental improvement because of Governor Whitmer's upped investment, but that will of course level off when the bonding stops. But talk about your broader takeaways on just the pavement.
Yeah, well, I dived into the local roads because, no offense to MDOT, most of the state highways are in pretty good shape and are getting in much better shape than they were, in part because of the governor's bonding program, because that has injected 3.5 billion over a 3 or 4 year period, and that's certainly starting to show. But anyone who drives a local road knows that is where the proverbial rubber meets the broken road, and particularly in Southeast Michigan. And this is where I have long thought there is a massive disconnect in the legislature, and that is in part because the people who chair the Appropriations Committee, the Transportation Appropriations Committee, the people who are the Speaker of the House, the Senate Majority Leader, they are almost all been from outside of Southeast Michigan. I mean, the closest we've had to a legislative leader to Detroit is, or Wayne County is Randy Richardville, and he's been gone for 8 years now from the legislature, and so
And
they're
he was instrumental in almost getting a real plan over the finish line in 2014.
yeah, he and someone named Gretchen Whitmer
Yeah,
were
that's
very
right.
much involved in trying to get that and make that happen. They were stopped by the then Speaker of the House, Chase Bolger, who insisted on that he was not going to do a deal without getting the sales tax off of gasoline, which if you talk to anybody, any voter on the street, and you tell them that that the 6% sales tax doesn't go to roads, they get red in the face. I mean, it really bothers people. But there's this thing called the education lobby, and they're pretty powerful at Lansing. When you start talking about taking sales tax away from gasoline, it's $1 billion a year, if not more, in road funding. Now, we're recording this on Thursday, the 24th of March. Today, Senate Minority Leader Jim Ananich introduced a bill to pause that sales tax on gasoline for the remainder of the year as a different tax relief mechanism. And he's got an interesting take on this, that that the legislature budgets for school aid fund to get that $1 billion based on about $2.85 a gallon gas. Annick argues that the math works out that we've already earned all that sales tax as a state for this fiscal year for the first 6 months, because gas has been over $3 a gallon basically since November.
I think
And
it's safe to call that a windfall.
yes, and so you could make an argument that the schools have already gotten their share, so it won't be defunding schools, which is obviously something nobody wants to take a vote on in an election year and get portrayed as. But they want to make sure that that they're held harmless. And Nick said, yeah, there's some money that goes to cities, constitutional revenue sharing, but there's a couple $1 billion of surplus laying around in Lansing right now, and that could be made up. But anyways, to get back to the sort of larger issue here, the local roads have always, to me, always been where the legislature has not spent enough time focusing on solving. And that's in part the way Act 51 works and who gets money. I've written about what I think is sort of the cancer of some of this in the suburbs of Detroit and other suburbs, other suburban areas around the state. It's charter townships. They can just approve development and leave their county the bill for fixing the roads. A few years ago, I was up going to a friend's birthday party on 23 Mile in Macomb Township, and there was a project there to widen a 1 mile section of 23 Mile in order to put in turn lanes and accommodate density that was going into old farm fields. They were building these condos on 23 Mile Road, which, anybody knows Macomb County, that's pretty far away from, from the interstate and from the rest of from job centers and all that and such. But so I looked up what are they spending on this, and it was $10 million. And the time, Macomb County itself had 800 lane miles of road in poor condition, and they were replacing about 75 a year. So it's going to take like 12 years to fix all the existing bad roads in Macomb County, but somehow they had found money for essentially more sprawl. And I've just have said since then, I wrote it in a piece in Cranes, and I've said this in multiple speeches about this subject in front of Rotary clubs and trade associations. We have simply built a state we cannot afford to maintain with the current revenue that we have. There's just no disputing that, and so catching up is just impossible at this rate. And this data from the County Road Association really kind of tells the story. Last year, county agencies repaved or rebuilt or repaired in some way 5,700 miles of roads. The engineers out there say that they need to be doing 15% of all county-owned roads. That would mean they need to get 13,500 miles of road a year. There's a 7,800 mile gap in roads that need to be
and the
fixed.
point you make is a really good one. It's almost like when you buy a condo and somebody didn't disclose that there's also association fees. We need to say, look, every time you build a development, this is what's going to go with it. And here are the liabilities and the costs, and they're going to be spread around to all of us, whether you wanted that housing development out in the middle of nowhere or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And like at the time, like 3 years ago, Senate Majority Leader Mike Shirkey was getting kind of a lot of grief because he came out and said that some roads probably just need to go back to gravel, and there was some snickering about that, particularly down like at the Oakland County Road Commission, because Oakland County has more gravel roads, total miles of gravel roads than any county in the state, which is like mind-boggling. But if you go out in rural Oakland County, there's subdivision after subdivision on gravel roads. And that same week, I happened to be going to one of Bob Seger's final concerts at Pine Knob, and and I got stuck in like the back roads behind Pine Knob, which are completely gravel. They're great gravel roads. They're really well maintained. And I should also say, my parents built a lake house out in rural Livingston County on a gravel road, and the Livingston County Road Commission is amazing for the work they put in to grading that road and keeping it maintained. That's a huge part of road maintenance. So it was at the time when Shirkey suggested that, there was a lot of people in particularly in the county road industry they were kind of laughing because gravel roads aren't free either, and they have to be paved. They have to be plowed and get new treated and everything else in
There's still
between.
maintenance work to be done for sure.
Yeah.
So this is good. We could talk about this forever. I think you gave me enough to springboard onto your story, and we're going to talk about this more. I think the last time you were on the podcast back in 2019, you talked about the advice that veteran Detroit News journalist Gary Heinlein gave you, and I think that axiom still holds.
Yeah, Gary told me on my first day on the job at the Detroit News, we'll never write enough about roads, and he's completely right. I think of takeaway policymakers is they need to go back and look at what was done, and this is important point here, Jeff, real quickly is there's about a dozen senators who were in the House in 2015. That's it. There's like 130 some members of the legislature who had no role in the policy that is prescribed the amount of funding that we have today for roads in Michigan.
So next time we take up term limits.
Well, I wrote a piece a couple of years ago. You want to fix the damn roads, fix damn term limits first. But yeah, and the other thing is like data this data don't lie. I mean, 20 most populous counties, and 7 years ago, 13.5% of them had good condition roads, and in those 20 most populous counties, and now it's just over 17%. I mean, we haven't really made a whole lot of progress on this front, and that is one case for not changing term limits. At least is we need legislators who actually are keeping the ball, their eye on this ball, and reevaluating it intellectually, with intellectual honesty, and not from a partisan standpoint or from a short term. This is not my problem. People need to kind of take an eye on this, because as time goes on, we know there's going to be a cliff here when all this federal aid runs out and the bond money runs out, and then we're going to start being back in the same position that we were 7-10 years ago.
Amen. And that's a great segue for my next guest, Craig Newell, who is a policy pavement expert at MDOT, administrator in that area, and can talk about how they track pavement and make projections on conditions. So Chad, thank you as always. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate your thorough reporting and all that you've done to shine a light on this issue.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Please stay tuned. We'll be back with more Talking Michigan Transportation right after this.
Know before you go. Head on over to MyDrive to check out the latest on road construction and possible delays along your route. For a detailed map, head over to michigan.gov/drive.
Okay, again, we're back, this time with Craig Newell, who is the administrator of the statewide planning division at MDOT. First time visitor to the podcast. Before we talk a little bit about your unit's work, very good work, very helpful work, tracking pavement and the science that you use to make projections, just talk a little bit about your background, Craig, and how you came to be in the role you're in.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff, for having me. Yeah, I've been with the department for 30 years now. Hard to believe, but and actually been in the Bureau of Transportation Planning my entire career. So right out of school, came to the department as an intern, and have had the opportunity to work my way up within the Bureau of Transportation Planning over my 30-year career.
So what else have you done? It sounds like for a long time, I know you had a brief stint in policy, but for a long time you've been focused on pavement.
Yeah, so in my division now, and where I pretty much have come up through the department, we focus on asset management and development of the highway program. So we work closely with the engineers in project selection and developing the 5-year plan list of projects that gets put out to the public every year. So we do everything from revenue forecasting to pavement condition forecasting to reviewing the projects that get selected with the region engineers and publishing them in the 5-year plan and monitoring them to make sure they get delivered.
So you're not over asset management, but you work closely with the folks that do asset management. And that's related to what you do and your unit does in terms of tracking pavement and pavement condition. The general public has no idea what a science there is involved in that and how important it is to really know the true condition and where the pavement's going so that you can use asset management principles to stay on top of it and, make the money go as far as it can. I mean, that's one of the reasons Michigan and MDOT has been a leader in asset management nationally is out of necessity because we've underfunded for so long. We've got to do things, creative things to make the money go farther. Talk about how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. Michigan was one of the first states, I think, in the country to get involved in asset management. We've been doing it since 1997. We've developed our own tools and our own measures and, have a very mature asset management process. At this point, after doing it for so long. So really, there's one main pavement condition measure, performance measure, if you will, that the department uses, and that's remaining service life, what we call RSL. That is more of a pavement health measure, if you will. It kind of measures the structural integrity of our pavements rather than just looking at it from what sometimes is called a windshield survey. So it is exactly what it sounds like. How much life is left in a particular pavement section? How many years of life until that pavement is no longer cost efficient to just do a preventive maintenance fix. It actually would have to be a more like a reconstruction, a more heavy type, more cost expensive fix. So we use remaining service life as our main measure, and we have a tool that utilizes that measure called the road quality forecasting system. That was developed again in-house, but it is the main tool that we use to identify. Basically, that tool can do two things, Jeff. It can given a certain investment amount, it can tell us, it can forecast what pavement condition will be in a certain year, or secondly, given an investment required to achieve a certain pavement condition. So for example, the State Transportation Commission identified a pavement condition goal way back in the 90s again, that basically 90% of our pavements, our state trunk line pavements, would be in good or fair condition. And this tool will tell us how much additional funding we need each year to achieve that goal. And that's a big number, right, Jeff? We've thrown out that number of about an additional $1.9 billion annually over the next 10 years just for MDOT's pavements to achieve that goal.
Which are, they carry more than 50% of the state's traffic, but in terms of overall lane miles, it's a fraction of the state's, right?
Exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of other roads out there that the department doesn't oversee that have a lot of needs as well, for sure.
So real quickly, while we're on that asset management issue, it seems counterintuitive to some people, and we get asked all the time, why wouldn't you just, fix the worst ones first?
Yeah, so the whole asset management approach is to developing the program is to do the right fix at the right time. So certainly there's if you wait too long, a pavement has a life, right? It kind of has a life cycle to a pavement. It starts out brand new, and then it starts aging, and then at the end of its life, it has zero pavement life left, and that's usually typically 20 to 30 years on a brand new reconstructed pavement. So the asset management approach tells us what type of fix we should be doing along that pavement's life. At the beginning, we should be doing preventive maintenance, capital preventive maintenance type fixes while that pavement is still in good and fair condition to keep it that way. Those are, not as expensive, not as heavy type fixes that are going to keep that pavement and give it a longer pavement life, if you will. And then as that pavement ages, and we've done a number of those preventive maintenance type fixes, you're going to require more of a heavier type fix, maybe a heavy resurface or rehabilitation type fix, which are a little bit more expensive, but they'll also extend the life of that pavement. And then once you've done that so many times, you're getting down to the point where those types of fixes no longer are cost effective, and you really need to spend the money to reconstruct that entire pavement. And those are the more expensive fixes.
And that's what Governor Whitmer has tried to emphasize with the Rebuilding Michigan program. When she says, we're going to fix them right, we're going to use the right materials, that's not a slap at any road agencies. It's basically saying that you see roads that seem to be worked on frequently, you hear the complaints from people that, they were out there just a couple of years ago. Well, it's because they were doing the best they could with the money, some kind of preventative maintenance. And the idea is if we can invest where we need to completely rebuild, that it should last a good long time. That's the idea.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I've heard the figure thrown around that, it costs 7 to 10 times the investment if you wait until the road is poor and you can't do those preventive maintenance type fixes on that road anymore, and you have to do a more expensive reconstruction. So that's exactly right. The asset management approach, saves the taxpayers money, essentially. It extends the lives of those pavements.
Well, thanks, Craig, for taking time to explain that. And thank you to you and everybody in your area for your responsiveness and all you do to help, our efforts in media relations and help the public understand these topics that can be a little bit thick sometimes. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Thank you again for listening to this week's edition of the Talking Michigan Transportation Podcast. I would like to thank Randy Dubler and Corey Peaty for engineering this week's podcast. To subscribe to show notes and more, go to Apple Podcasts and search for Talking Michigan Transportation.